I've made it up to this ridiculous ledge here. Good morning. It is January 11th, 2025, and this is the best day of the year so far for heading up into the winter mountains. And so I'm here at Akita Komagatake. Even on the drive here, there was all this snowy mist rising from above the rice fields in Shizukuishi. It was just stunning. Days like this, can't get enough of them. As you can see, there is a very nice trail. That means it is easy walking. Finally, at the last stretch of this wide open area, before I enter the forest. For this part of the route through the forest, you go back and forth between walking directly through the forest and walking on this small road. This is a one-lane road I'm walking on right now, that during the green season you can take a bus or during certain times of year your own car all the way up to the 8th Station Lodge. Of course it closes from November, and so now it's covered in snow. On perfect bluebird days like today, it does tend to look, well, more or less the same every year, but it's so gorgeous I don't mind. It's minus 10 degrees, but as you can see, my ears aren't even cold. As long as there's no wind and you're in the sun and moving, it's not that cold really, even at minus 10 Celsius. Just great. If this were much closer to Tokyo, I think it would be actually crowded. Wouldn't you want to come if you lived close to this? Still not a cloud in the sky. Just a little bit farther to the lodge. Still haven't seen that many people. Passed about 8 along the way, 3 that were only going part way, and the other 5 are just a little bit behind me. And you understand why I stop every few minutes to just take more pictures. It's perfect here, right? And here's the lodge. Akikomaは何が好きですか？
Akikomaはやっぱりね、おなめからのおなめの直途ですね。おなめの。
ああ、それが一番いいです。
あとこのなんだろう、樹林帯も気持ちいいじゃないですか。
気持ちいいです。
気持ちいい。
毎年何回くらい来ますか？
まあ天気いい時で2回3回だけど、ここまでで終わっちゃうことも半分くらいあります。
まあ天気
悪いともうホワイトアウトなんで打ちます。
はい、ありがとうございます。じゃあ楽しんでまた山頂で。
ありがとうございます。
That is Gaki-san. He is a local hiker who is incredibly tough. He's in his 60s and he's still doing all these crazy wild winter mountains and harder ones than this. Every time I come here, this just knocks my socks off every single time. There's just a slight wind. Maybe you can hear it blowing against the camera, but it's really not bad. It's pretty rare that I can be here in January and not need to put on my winter cap. Believe it or not, my ears are not cold. The slope that I'm on right now is actually really steep, and the me from, I don't know, 5-6 years ago would have been really nervous, like stressing about it. But yeah, repeated exposure, how about that? I know that I've got good strong grips on my snowshoes, and being right next to a very steep snowy slope down to a drop-off, at this point, not stressing about it. and watch those be the last words I ever said. But don't worry, I'm not getting overconfident. I'm careful and deliberate, and that's why I'm comfortable. This is the final approach to Onamedake, the highest summit in Akita Komogatake, and there's a lot fewer people than I expected, actually. I mean, clearly you can see these 3 traces of skiers that went down, but just 3. The rest of the people seem to be snowshoers. A couple of people up at the lodge, but I expected this to be a crowded area. In previous years, there's been tons of people here. Once I get up to this plateau that's right at the base of the highest summit here, Onamedake, it's just perfect. I don't mind walking around back and forth, just hanging out. It's ideal up there. I'm on the last little bit, just maybe 5-10 more minutes going up this pretty steep slope you can see behind me, and I'll be there. This final steep part is quite the workout on your legs. And on days like today where there's the veritable highway that people ahead have already carved out, it's not bad at all. Man, I'm lost in a cloud now. Right here is the summit of Onamedake, the highest of the 5 main mountains in Akita Komogatake, and kind of stuck in a cloud right now. A bit windy. This right here behind me is one of my favorite views. That's Meidake. That is the one that most recently erupted back in 1970-71, and which may erupt again sometime. We'll see. So far the risk is still at a level 1 out of 5, but it's just magical, isn't it? In the wintertime you can really see the volcanic gases just pouring off it. So that's Onamedake, and I'm doing something I've never done before, which is making the attempt to do a winter visit to Odake, which of course I've done dozens of times in the green season, but it's pretty scary in the winter. It's pretty steep, as you can see, so I'm not sure if I'm going to make it, but I'm doing my best right here. Following behind these brave out-of-towners, I've made it up to this ridiculous ledge here. And this is terrifying to me, but it's not technically difficult. I can do it if I just, take each step slowly. Just came up this knife's edge. Wow, I made it up to this ridgeline. You can see the cornice there on the left, so you don't want to go too far to the left because you're just on a big chunk of snow that could fall off. The couple ahead of me I was just talking to, they're from Yamagata, and they came up from the lift, and so this is their way back, just going this way. Wow, isn't this amazing? I'm still just giddy from doing that knife's edge walk. It's, for me, psychologically scary. Over there, Meidake and Kodake. This is so narrow, it is terrifying. But I can do it. I have no choice. Lately, I've been reading a lot of Japanese history. I do a lot of guiding around here, and I want to learn more to be able to tell more and better stories. And one pattern that I've begun to notice is that the stories told on the signs and from locals that I meet differ pretty dramatically from what I read in academic papers online, as I've started to use them as a source for research as well. So one example of that is the history of how this area here of northern Japan became part of the Japanese Empire. So the popular narrative is that in the late 8th century, Emperor Kanmu sent this great general named Sakanoue to Muromaro. I've mentioned him a number of times before in my videos actually, and he went forth with a huge army, 50,000 or more people, on a great campaign to conquer the Emishi peoples, these northern barbarians that inhabited the area of Japan where I live in now, Tohoku. Pretty much everything north of Fukushima was inhabited by them. After fighting for decades, fought against this great tribal leader, Aterui. Some stories even tell of sort of a mutual respect, some trickery, and how eventually Aterui is captured and brought down to Kyoto and executed. And thus, with the chieftain lost, the other tribes fall to shambles, the union crumbles, and Sakanoue to Muromaro triumphs and brings all of northern Japan into the fold. And from there on, it's just part of Japan. And of course, these are historical figures. Aterui did exist, he does have a grave in Kyoto, and Sakanoue to Muromaro is of course a very well documented Japanese historical figure. However, what actually happened looks to be a lot less dramatic. It does appear that there was a campaign that Sakanoue to Muromaro did lead an army, but he was just one of a number of leaders that went on several shorter campaigns during this 3 or 4 decade period of this war to subdue the Emishi. And each campaign was relatively short, and they didn't really accomplish that much. They did fight, they did burn villages. It looks like not that much actually changed. And sure, victory was declared, but they didn't actually suddenly bring the northern area under control during those decades. And in 812, there wasn't such a dramatic difference than there was in 750 before all that started. It was a gradual process which was happening during that period and continued to happen after that period. And a lot of the leaders who ruled up through the Fujiwaras were actually Emishi peoples themselves. It does look like the 2 major samurai clans that were ruling northern Japan, like right where I lived in Morioka and then down south a little bit in Hiraizumi, were Emishi peoples. The Abe clan, Abe sounds like a Japanese name, but this Abe clan took their name and adopted it. They were actually Emishi, a different race, speaking a different language actually, up here. It was popular back then for them to take on the names when they took on governor or sort of leadership roles. So anyways, I don't want to get too into the weeds because these are fun stories that I'll tell in another video. But I wonder, when it comes to something like the ancient history of this region here, which story in a way is really more meaningful? When we're talking about 1200 years ago, maybe you could say that the objective truth, as far as we can tell, that's being now extolled in academic papers, is only equally meaningful to the stories that the Japanese people of this region tell of themselves and of their own history, to the point where it's really tied up in their identity. I'm currently reading another book by a German professor who came a little bit farther north in Aomori here and lived in a small community where there is a group of women who are mountain ascetics, and they would go up on Mount Iwaki and have visions and do spiritual training. And one of them claimed that she was possessed by the spirit of Sakanoue to Muromaro, that same conquering general. And they have stories about he seduced the local demons and spirits of the mountains, and through receiving their power was able to defeat the Emishi. There's all sorts of stories that really tie into how people view themselves and their ancestors up here. And I can't help but thinking that that's as meaningful as the objective truth, even if in reality, Sakanoue to Muromaro never even went to Aomori. Likely he didn't go past middle of Iwate. There are literally dozens of tales about that great general, and they're tied into all sorts of different locations, how he tamed a demon here, how he rested his wounds and thus founded a hot springs there. There's even a story that he declared Mount Iwate, Himekami, and Haichine, 3 mountains around the Morioka area, sacred mountains in the early 800s. And he may have, but it's unlikely, to be honest. But I love those stories, and I think it's fun to remember and tell those stories to people. The sun is getting lower and lower, and it is going to get quite cold. Now it's about -10 degrees Celsius, which, because there's no wind and I've been walking around a lot, doesn't feel bad, but it's, yeah, gonna drop pretty quickly. Wow, that sun is just going beyond the other side of the ridge. So I'll talk to you again later. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the trails.